The Zephyrian ambassador's crystalline body shimmered with nervous energy as she stood before the United Earth Council. Her species had ruled the Andromeda trade nexus for over 3 millennia, yet today she came as a beggar. The massive holographic display behind her showed the horror unfolding across 17 star systems. The Devourers had returned. Honored humans. Zalthara's voice resonated through her natural crystalline formations. We come to you, not as the proud civilization that once looked down upon your primitive world, but as desperate souls facing extinction. Council President Maria Santos leaned forward in her chair, her weathered face showing no emotion. Around the circular chamber, representatives from Earth's various nations and colonies watched silently. They all remembered the history. How the Zephyrians had discovered Earth in 2157, offering advanced technology in exchange for what they called primitive labor contracts. How humanity had spent 40 years, essentially as indentured servants to alien masters, building their stations, mining their asteroids, fighting their small wars. The Devourers consume everything, Zalthara continued, her form flickering with distress patterns. They strip entire worlds of all organic and synthetic matter, growing stronger with each system they claim. Our greatest fleets, our most powerful weapons, our ancient alliances, all have fallen before them. 17 systems have gone dark in the past 6 months. Dr. James Richardson, Earth's chief science advisor, spoke first. Our records show the Devourers were defeated once before, nearly 4,000 years ago. What's different now? The ambassador's light dimmed. Then, we had the combined might of 47 species, including the Eternal Makers, who could reshape reality itself. The Makers have ascended beyond physical existence. The Thorian Empire collapsed into civil war. The Quantum Lords retreated to their pocket dimensions. We are alone, facing an enemy that has learned from its ancient defeat. President Santos stood slowly. And you come to us because? Because humans are the only species that has ever surprised us. Zalthara's admission hung in the air like a challenge. When we first encountered your kind, we saw primitive mammals barely capable of basic spaceflight. We expected compliance, submission, gradual development under our guidance. Instead, you absorbed our technology, improved upon it, and within a single generation had surpassed many of our achievements. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Senator Nakamura from the Luna colony raised his hand. That's a generous interpretation. As I recall, your people called us useful animals for most of those 40 years. Zalthara's crystalline form shifted to what humans had learned to recognize as shame. We were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. When the contracts ended and humanity chose independence over continued partnership, many of my people celebrated. We thought we had extracted all useful knowledge and labor from your species. We believed you would retreat to your small corner of the galaxy and remain there. Instead, President Santos said with a slight smile, we built our own empire. An empire unlike any other, the ambassador agreed. Your colonies don't just extract resources, they transform worlds into gardens. Your trade networks don't just move goods, they spread ideas, cultures, innovations. Your military doesn't just conquer, it liberates and protects. In 2 centuries, humanity has accomplished what took most species 2 millennia. Admiral Chen Wang, head of the Solar Defense Force, leaned back in his chair. Flattery aside, Ambassador, what exactly are you asking for? The holographic display changed, showing tactical data from recent Devourer encounters. The images were horrifying. Vast biomechanical entities the size of moons, surrounded by swarms of smaller craft that seemed to consume light itself. Entire fleets simply disappeared into writhing masses of darkness. The Devourers move in a pattern, Zalthara explained. They consume a system completely, then pause to process and grow before moving to the next. They are currently processing the Keltar system, which gives us perhaps 3 months before they continue their advance toward the galactic core. Where Earth happens to be, Dr. Richardson observed. Where everything happens to be, the ambassador corrected. If they reach the core worlds, if they claim the ancient technology vaults of the first civilization, they will become unstoppable. Not just in this galaxy, but in all galaxies. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of air recyclers. President Santos walked to the massive window overlooking Geneva's skyline, where the lights of 10 million people twinkled like earthbound stars. Beyond Earth's atmosphere, she could see the construction lights of the new orbital shipyards, humanity's latest achievement in their rapid expansion across the stars. "You're asking us to risk everything," she said finally. "Our fleets, our colonies, our people, all to save civilizations that once treated us as servants. I am asking you to save yourselves," Zalthara replied. "But I am also offering something more. The location of the Nexus Vaults." Every human in the chamber stiffened. The Nexus Vaults were legendary. Repositories of technology and knowledge gathered over millions of years by dozens of ancient civilizations. Their location had been the most closely guarded secret in the galaxy for over 3,000 years. "The Zephyrian High Council has voted," the ambassador continued. "If humanity leads the defense against the Devourers, we will transfer complete access to the vaults to your species. Every secret, every technology, every piece of accumulated wisdom, all of it, will become humanity's inheritance." Admiral Wang stood abruptly. "That's impossible. The vaults contain the genetic patterns for extinct species, the construction methods for Dyson spheres, the mathematical foundations for faster-than-light communication across galactic distances. You're offering us godhood. We are offering you the tools to save the galaxy," Zalthara said simply. "Because we have finally learned what we should have understood 2 centuries ago. Humanity doesn't just adapt to challenges. You transcend them." Tenses. 5-1. Quote. President Santos turned back to face the assembly. "I need to understand something. Ambassador, this debt you mentioned, what debt exactly do you think humanity owes?" The Zephyrian's form pulsed with confusion. I do not understand. We come offering payment, not seeking it. When your people discovered Earth, you found a species that had just achieved basic spaceflight. We were taking our first hesitant steps toward the stars." Santos's voice grew stronger. "You could have offered partnership, shared knowledge freely, helped us grow as equals. Instead, you saw an opportunity for exploitation." The ambassador's light dimmed further. "Yes, we did. You made us work for 40 years to earn technology you could have given freely. You treated human beings as tools, not as sentient equals worthy of respect." The president's words carried the weight of generations of remembered humiliation. "And when we finally proved ourselves capable of independence, when we showed we could innovate and grow beyond your expectations, your people celebrated getting rid of us." "President Santos," Xalthara began. But Santos held up a hand. "I'm not finished. For 200 years, humanity has had to prove itself worthy of respect in a galaxy where every other species learned to see us as former servants. We've had to work twice as hard, fight twice as fiercely, and innovate twice as fast just to be taken seriously." She paused, letting the words settle. "The debt isn't ours, Ambassador. It's yours." The chamber was absolutely silent. Even the background hum of the building's systems seemed muted. Zalthara's crystalline form had gone completely still, a sign of deep contemplation among her people. "You are correct," she said finally. "The debt is ours. We took from humanity when we should have given. We diminished your people when we should have celebrated them. We delayed your rightful place among the stars by centuries." Her form began to brighten again, but with a different quality of light. "We cannot repay what we have taken, but we can ensure that what we offer now is given freely, without conditions or expectations of servitude." President Santos nodded slowly. "The vaults? Will be transferred to human control regardless of your decision about the Devourers, Zalthara stated firmly. Consider it the first payment on a debt that can never be fully settled. The shock that rippled through the chamber was almost physical. Representative after representative began speaking at once, until Santos called for order. Why? Admiral Wang demanded. Why would you give us that kind of power with no guarantee we'll help you? Because, the ambassador replied, her voice carrying notes that humans had learned to associate with deep sincerity. Helping others is what humans do. We have studied your history, your expansion, your interactions with other species. When the Kalari faced extinction from a solar flare, human ships were first to arrive with aid. When the Mantis Confederation's economy collapsed, human traders offered favorable deals instead of exploitation. When the Yishian plague threatened to wipe out 3 systems, human medical teams worked for 2 years without payment to develop a cure. She gestured to the display, which now showed images of human colonies. Not the sterile industrial complexes most species built, but vibrant worlds where multiple species lived and worked together. Other species conquer or exploit or ignore. Humans elevate. Even your former enemies become your allies. Even those who have wronged you find redemption in your service. Her form pulsed with what might have been hope. If anyone can find a way to defeat the Devourers while saving as many lives as possible, it will be humanity. Dr. Richardson leaned forward. What do you know about the Devourers that you haven't told us? There has to be something more. The ambassador's light flickered with what humans recognized as uncertainty. The ancient records speak of a weakness, but it was never confirmed. The Devourers were defeated 4,000 years ago not through superior firepower, but through sacrifice. The Eternal Makers gave their physical forms to create a barrier that trapped the Devourers in dark space between galaxies. What kind of sacrifice? President Santos asked quietly. Total conversion of living matter into pure energy, directed and sustained by conscious will. It required beings capable of maintaining coherent thought, even as their physical forms dissolved into component particles. Zalthara's admission came reluctantly. No known species has that capability now. The Makers were unique in their quantum consciousness. The implications hung heavy in the air. Admiral Wang was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. You're talking about a suicide mission on a cosmic scale. I am talking about the only known method to stop an enemy that grows stronger with every victory, the ambassador corrected. But perhaps human ingenuity can find another way. Your species has a talent for making the impossible merely difficult. President Santos looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of Earth's representatives. She saw fear there, yes, but also determination. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. We'll need complete tactical data on all Devourer encounters, she said finally. Full access to Zephyrian military assets, and command authority over any joint operations. Granted, Zalthara replied immediately. We'll also need to contact every spacefaring species in the galaxy. If we're going to do this, we'll need everyone. Many will refuse to follow human leadership, the ambassador warned. The old prejudices run deep, President Santos smiled grimly. Then, they'll learn what we learned 2 centuries ago. Sometimes, you have to prove yourself worthy of respect. She stood, and the rest of the chamber rose with her. Convene the emergency session. Contact the fleet commanders, and get me a direct line to every human colony in the galaxy. As the chamber began to empty, Zalthara remained standing before the great window. Admiral Wang paused beside her. Ambassador, he said quietly. What makes you so certain we can succeed where everyone else has failed? The crystalline being's form pulsed with colors that had no human names. Because, Admiral, in all our history, in all our myths and legends and ancient records, there has never been a species quite like humanity. You are the first to be enslaved and emerge stronger. The first to be underestimated and exceed all expectations. The first to be dismissed and then save the dismissers. She turned to face him, her alien features somehow conveying deep respect. The Devourers have never faced a species that makes hope into a weapon. They are about to learn what that means. As the Admiral walked away, Zalthara remained at the window, watching the lights of human civilization twinkle below. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, an ancient enemy was stirring. But for the first time in 6 months, since the first Devourer ships had emerged from dark space, she allowed herself to believe that the galaxy might survive. After all, the humans were coming. The massive war room aboard the human flagship Determination Times hummed with activity as representatives from 43 species gathered around the holographic battle display. Admiral Sarah Chen studied the assembled delegates with careful eyes. Some, like the towering Gorvani and the ethereal Whispers, had answered humanity's call immediately. Others, like the proud hegemony of Keth, had come only after 3 of their outer colonies had gone silent under Devourer assault. The enemy has completed processing of the Keltar system, reported Captain Torres, humanity's chief intelligence officer. The hologram showed a dead zone where 17 worlds had once thrived. No energy signatures, no debris, nothing but empty space marked by gravitational anomalies. Long-range scans indicate they're preparing to move toward the Meridian cluster. Commander Thexval of the Hegemony shifted his massive armored form. The Meridian cluster contains our primary shipyards. If it falls, the Hegemony loses 60% of our fleet production capacity. It won't fall, Admiral Chen stated calmly, because we're going to stop them before they get there. The Gorvani representative, a being whose species communicated through modulated electromagnetic fields, pulsed with skepticism. Human Admiral Chen, the combined fleets of 7 species have already failed to slow the Devourers. What makes you believe our forces will succeed where others have not? Chen activated a new section of the holographic display, showing detailed analysis of every recorded Devourer encounter. Because everyone who fought them before was fighting the wrong battle. She highlighted specific moments in the tactical recordings. Massive alien fleets, forming traditional battle lines, attempting to engage the Devourers with concentrated firepower. In every case, the result was the same. The biomechanical horrors simply absorbed the energy attacks, growing larger and more powerful with each assault. The Devourers aren't just ships or weapons, Chen continued. They're a collective organism that feeds on organized energy. Every shot we fire at them, every explosion near them, every power core that overloads in their presence, it all just makes them stronger. In the class, Kuden for unround. Lastra. In question, we fire the Pansible. Every shot we fire them their presence. The Whisper delegate, a translucent being whose thoughts manifested as visible geometric patterns, projected confusion. Then how do you propose we fight an enemy that grows stronger from our attacks? Admiral Chen smiled grimly and activated another display. This one showed the human fleet formations, not the massive dreadnoughts that other species favored, but smaller, faster vessels arranged in complex 3-dimensional patterns. We don't fight them, she said. We out-think them. Over the next hour, Chen outlined humanity's battle strategy. Instead of direct confrontation, human forces would use their superior maneuverability to herd the Devourers into carefully prepared kill zones. The weapons wouldn't be energy-based attacks, but rather gravitational manipulators that would create artificial black holes in precise locations. Black holes don't feed the enemy, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, humanity's chief xenobiologist. They consume everything, including the exotic matter that comprises Devourer bodies. And since they're natural phenomena rather than constructed weapons, the Devourers can't adapt to them or absorb their energy. The assembled delegates exchanged glances. Commander Thexval leaned forward, his species equivalent of intense interest. This strategy requires precise coordination across multiple fleet groups. The timing must be perfect, or the gravitational effects will destroy our own ships, which is why humans will be flying the guidance ships, Admiral Chen replied. Every kill zone requires a volunteer crew to manually guide the gravitational manipulators while staying within the event horizon's influence. The pilots won't survive, but they'll ensure the weapons hit their targets. The room fell silent. The Whisper delegates' geometric thought patterns shifted to what humans had learned to recognize as horror. You are proposing suicide missions. We're proposing victory, Chen corrected firmly. Every human pilot understands the risks. Every one of them volunteered anyway. Ambassador Zalthara, who had remained silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. In all our recorded history, no species has ever willingly sacrificed individuals for the survival of others not related by genetics or hive bonds. This concept of altruistic death, it is uniquely human. Captain Maria Santos, President Santos's daughter and commander of the Fast Attack Squadron, stood from her position near the display. With respect, Ambassador, you're wrong. Every species here has individuals willing to die for the greater good. The difference is that humans have figured out how to make those deaths count for something. She activated her own tactical display, showing the proposed fleet movements in detail. We've run the simulations 800 times. With perfect execution, we can eliminate approximately 30% of the Devourer mass in the first engagement. The survivors will be weakened enough for conventional forces to have a fighting chance in follow-up battles. And if the execution is not perfect, asked the Gorvani representative, then we try again. Admiral Chen replied simply. And again. And however many times it takes. The strategic planning session lasted another 6 hours. Species after species raised objections, concerns, modifications to the human plan. Some suggestions were practical. The hegemony's heavier ships could provide better cover for the approach phase. Others were born of desperation. The Whispers offered to sacrifice their entire remaining fleet in a single, massive assault. Admiral Chen listened to every proposal, considered every alternative, and then explained patiently why the human approach offered the best chance of success. Not just survival, but actual victory against an enemy that had never been truly defeated. As the session concluded, and delegates began filing out to brief their respective fleets, Ambassador Xalthara approached Admiral Chen at the central display. Admiral, the Zephyrian said quietly, there is something else. Something I have not shared with the others. Chen waited, recognizing the signs of deep distress in the ambassador's crystalline form. The Devourers are not just consuming matter and energy, Zalthara continued. They are consuming consciousness itself. Every mind they encounter, every thinking being in the systems they have taken, all of it becomes part of their collective awareness. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. You're saying they know everything that every one of their victims knew? Worse, they experience everything their victims experienced. Every memory, every skill, every piece of knowledge. The ambassador's form dimmed with shame. They know our tactics, our weaknesses, our technologies. They know them intimately, because they have consumed the minds of millions of our best strategists, our finest engineers, our most experienced warriors. Admiral Chen stared at the holographic display, where the Devourer formations pulsed with malevolent life. Why didn't you tell us this during the briefing? Because I was not certain you would still agree to fight, Zalthara admitted. The knowledge changes everything. They will anticipate our strategies. They will counter our technologies. They have the accumulated wisdom of 36 species at their disposal. Chen was quiet for a long moment, processing this new information. Around them, the war room continued its activity. Human and alien technicians working side by side to refine targeting solutions, communication protocols, and emergency procedures. Ambassador, Chen said finally, you still don't understand humans very well, do you? The Zephyrian's confusion was visible in the patterns of light across her form. You just told me that our enemy has absorbed the knowledge and experience of millions of the galaxy's best minds, Chen continued. That they know everything there is to know about warfare, strategy, and tactics. She smiled grimly. What they don't know is how to be human. I do not understand. Every species they've consumed thinks logically, rationally, strategically. They make careful plans based on available resources and probable outcomes. Admiral Chen gestured toward the bustling activity around them. Humans don't do that. We do stupid things for emotional reasons. We make impossible choices because they're the right choices. We sacrifice ourselves for people we've never met, because that's who we choose to be. She activated a personal display showing personnel files. Thousands of them. Every file marked with a small notation, indicating the individual had volunteered for high-risk assignments. The Devourers have consumed strategic genius from dozens of species, Chen said. But they've never consumed the mind of someone who looked at impossible odds and said, "Challenge accepted." They don't understand the mentality that turns desperation into determination. Ambassador Zalthara studied the files scrolling past. Human names, human faces, human lives, all marked for potential sacrifice. You believe this irrationality is an advantage? I believe it's the only advantage we have left. Chen closed the display and looked directly at the ambassador. The Devourers understand logic, strategy, survival instinct. They don't understand hope. They don't understand the human capacity to keep fighting, even when fighting is pointless. The Admiral paused, considering her next words carefully. There's something else, isn't there? Something about how the Devourers were stopped before? Zalthara's form went very still. The ancient records speak of the final gambit, the moment when the Eternal Makers realized that conventional warfare was futile. They They chose to become living weapons. Not just their technology, not just their ships, but their very essence. They converted themselves into energy and used their consciousness to direct it, Chen said. It wasn't a question. Yes. But the process requires a level of mental discipline and quantum awareness that took the Makers millions of years to develop. Even with the knowledge from the Nexus vaults, no current species could accomplish such a feat. Admiral Chen nodded slowly. No current species, except humans. The ambassador's shock was visible as flashing patterns of light across her crystalline surface. Admiral, surely you cannot be serious. The risks are acceptable, Chen interrupted. If our conventional tactics fail, if the gravitational weapons aren't enough, if the Devourers prove too adaptable, even for human unpredictability. She trailed off, looking out at the stars visible through the war room's massive viewport. Then we'll find volunteers for the final gambit too. That would be genocide of your own species, Zalthara protested. The process converts living matter into directed energy. There is no survival, no return. And if we do nothing, there's no survival for anyone. Chen's voice carried absolute certainty. Ambassador, every human in this fleet knows they probably won't live to see home again. They came anyway. Not because they're suicidal, but because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. The two beings stood in contemplative silence, surrounded by the organized chaos of humanity's greatest military undertaking. Around them, officers and technicians continued their preparations, their voices mixing human languages with the musical tones of whisper communication and the harmonic frequencies of Gorvani thought speech. There is one more thing, Zalthara said finally. The Nexus vaults contain detailed information about the final gambit process. If humanity truly intends to pursue this option, the knowledge is available. If humanity 24, the knowledge is available. Admiral Chen turned to face the ambassador fully. And you would give us this information knowing what we might do with it? I would give humanity anything that might save the galaxy. The Zephyrian replied without hesitation. Even if it means watching your species sacrifice itself for the rest of us. Even if it means living with the knowledge that we failed to protect the very people who chose to protect everyone else. The Admiral extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Ambassador Zalthara touched her crystalline appendage to Chen's palm. "Then we understand each other," Chen said. "Tomorrow we begin the approach to the Meridian Cluster. In 72 hours, we'll either have proven that humans can outthink an enemy that knows everything, or we'll have learned whether human stubbornness is stronger than cosmic horror. And if both fail?" Admiral Chen's smile was fierce and determined. "Then we'll try something even more impossible. Because that's what humans do, Ambassador. We specialize in making the universe bend to our will through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat." As the ambassador departed to coordinate with the Zephyrian fleet elements, Admiral Chen remained at the central display. The Devourers were moving again, emerging from the dead Keltar system like a plague of living darkness. Their destination was clear, their intent unmistakable. But for the first time since the crisis began, humanity was ready for them. Not with superior technology or overwhelming force, but with something far more dangerous. The absolute conviction that some things were worth dying for, and the creative stubbornness to find new ways to do the dying effectively. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and humanity had finally found a way to even the odds. The Battle of Meridian Prime began not with the thunder of massive guns, but with silence. As the Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a spreading cancer of living metal and writhing biomass, the combined galactic forces held their positions in apparent paralysis. To any observer, it would have seemed as though 43 species had simply given up. Captain Maria Santos gripped the controls of her fighter, *unbroken*, as she watched the enemy approach through her canopy. The Devourers had grown since Keltar. Their main body masses now stretched across kilometers, while swarms of smaller entities moved around them like antibodies protecting a diseased organism. The very space around them seemed to darken, as if they absorbed not just matter and energy but light itself. "All units, maintain radio silence." Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the quantum communicators. "Phase 1 is go." Across the three-dimensional battlefield, human ships began their dance. Unlike every previous engagement in galactic history, they didn't charge forward in formation or establish defensive lines. Instead, they scattered like startled birds, each ship following seemingly random flight paths that carried them away from the Devourers at high speed. The alien forces watched in confusion as humanity's fleet appeared to flee in panic. On the Hegemony flagship, Commander Thexval's tactical displays showed human ships breaking formation and racing toward empty space. The Gorvani fleet commanders pulsed with electromagnetic confusion. Even Ambassador Zalthara's crystalline form flickered with uncertainty aboard the Zephyrian command vessel. But the Devourers had learned from their previous encounters. They had consumed enough tactical minds to recognize a potential trap. Instead of pursuing the scattering human forces, the biomechanical horrors continued their steady advance toward Meridian Prime, maintaining formation discipline that would have impressed any military academy. What they didn't notice was that the human ships weren't fleeing randomly. Each vessel was moving to a precise coordinate in three-dimensional space, following flight paths calculated not for escape, but for positioning. Like seeds scattered by an intelligent wind, they were taking root in the darkness between stars. Captain Santos checked her navigation display. Her destination was a point in space that seemed completely unremarkable. No planets, no asteroids, no stellar phenomena of any kind. Just empty void. But according to the tactical plan, this spot would become the focal point for humanity's desperate gambit. "Unbroken to control," she transmitted on the quantum channel. "Approaching anchor point 77 Alpha. Confirmed, unbroken. Begin deployment of gravitational manipulator on my mark." Santos looked over her shoulder at the device that took up most of her fighter's cargo space. It didn't look like humanity's last hope, just a collection of exotic matter conduits and quantum field generators that Dr. Kim's team had assembled in the weeks leading up to the battle. But according to the simulations, when activated in precise conjunction with 47 identical devices, it would create something unprecedented in galactic warfare. "All anchor points, This is Admiral Chen. Came the transmission to all human vessels. The Devourers have passed the point of no return. They are now committed to their approach vector and cannot escape the engagement zone without losing significant momentum. Her voice carried grim satisfaction. Ladies and gentlemen, you are hereby authorized to activate gravitational manipulators on my mark. Remember, once you begin the sequence, you have approximately 40 seconds before the event horizon becomes impassable. Captain Santos felt her heart racing, but her hands remained steady on the controls. Around her, 47 other human pilots were making similar preparations. Each of them had volunteered for this mission knowing the cost. Each had said goodbye to family and friends, with the understanding that this was goodbye forever. Mark. Across the battlefield, 48 gravitational manipulators activated simultaneously. The effect wasn't immediately visible. Space didn't suddenly tear open or explode with exotic energies. Instead, the universe simply began to bend. The Devourers noticed the change almost immediately. Their formations shifted as gravitational sensors detected massive distortions appearing throughout the engagement zone. But by then, it was too late. The artificial black holes weren't just appearing randomly. They were connected, linked by precisely calculated gravitational fields that formed a three-dimensional web of inescapable attraction. Phase 2 is go, Admiral Chen announced. All non-human vessels begin herding maneuvers. Now, the alien fleets moved with purpose. The massive hegemony dreadnoughts opened fire not at the Devourers, but at empty space around them, creating energy barriers that channeled the enemy formations into increasingly narrow corridors. The Gorvani ships used their electromagnetic manipulation abilities to interfere with Devourer navigation systems. The ethereal whispers projected false sensor readings that made safe paths appear blocked while making deadly traps seem like escape routes. The Devourers found themselves being pushed, prodded, and guided like cattle being led to slaughter. Their collective intelligence recognized the threat, but their options were rapidly diminishing. They could try to break through the energy barriers, but that would scatter their formations and leave individual units vulnerable. They could attempt to reverse course, but their massive momentum and the increasing gravitational pull made that impossible. Or they could try to destroy the source of the gravitational manipulation. Captain Santos watched her instruments as the nearest Devourer entity changed course, its biomechanical bulk accelerating directly toward her position. She had expected this. The tactical plan had always assumed the enemy would try to eliminate the anchor points once they understood the trap. Unbroken to control, I have incoming. Large entity. Approaching fast. Confirmed. Unbroken. Estimated time to intercept? Santos checked her displays as the thing bearing down on her resolved into horrifying detail. It was smaller than the main Devourer bodies, only about 1 kilometer long, but its surface writhed with weapons that she couldn't identify and probably wouldn't survive. 35 seconds, she reported calmly. Gravitational field is at 60% and rising. The mathematics were elegant in their simplicity. The artificial black holes needed 40 seconds to reach critical density. The Devourers needed 35 seconds to reach weapons range. Captain Santos had 5 seconds to spare, which in tactical terms might as well have been an eternity. All units, Admiral Chen's voice came across the comm. We are seeing similar approach patterns at multiple anchor points. Remember, your job is not to survive. Your job is to ensure the gravitational fields reach critical threshold. Across the battlefield, 48 human pilots faced down approaching nightmare entities with nothing but small fighter craft and absolute determination. Some would last longer than others. Some would find ways to extend their survival by precious seconds through superior flying or creative tactics. But all of them knew how this would end. Santos armed her fighters' limited weapons systems. Not because she thought they would damage the Devourer, but because every second of confusion or distraction might help the manipulator complete its work. Around her, space itself was beginning to distort visibly as the artificial black hole approached critical mass. 20 seconds to critical, she announced. 15 to intercept. The Devourer entity opened fire with weapons that seemed to bend reality around them. Energy beams that existed in more than 3 dimensions carved through space where Santos had been a microsecond before. She threw her fighter into a spiraling, evasive pattern, using every trick of human ingenuity and desperation to stay alive for just a few more seconds. 10 seconds to critical. 5 to intercept. The thing was so close now that she could see individual details on its hull. Biomechanical components that pulsed with their own light. Weapon systems that defied known physics. Sensors that tracked her movements with predatory intelligence. Critical threshold achieved, she announced. Gravitational field is now self-sustaining. The words were barely out of her mouth when the Devourer's primary weapon found its target. The times, unbroken times, simply ceased to exist, converted to component atoms in an instant of unimaginable violence. But it was too late. The artificial black hole was now stable and growing, its event horizon expanding at an appreciable fraction of light speed. The Devourer entity that had destroyed Santos tried to escape, but the gravitational field had already trapped it beyond any possibility of retreat. Across the battlefield, similar dramas played out as human pilots held their positions until the last possible second. Some managed to escape when their pursuers were caught by the expanding event horizons. Others died in the moment of triumph, their sacrifices ensuring that the gravitational web would complete its work. The results were immediate and devastating. The Devourers found themselves being pulled inexorably toward points of infinite gravity that would consume them completely. But more than that, they discovered that the black holes were connected by gravitational fields that created a maze of inescapable attraction. There was no direction they could flee that didn't lead to another trap. Phase 3 is go, Admiral Chen announced. All vessels, begin final assault. Now the full galactic fleet moved forward, no longer facing an enemy that grew stronger from their attacks. The artificial black holes were consuming the Devourers faster than they could absorb energy from conventional weapons, creating a window of vulnerability that had never existed before. The battle that followed was fierce but brief. Deprived of their ability to feed on directed energy, the Devourers fought like any other enemy, desperately, but within the bounds of conventional physics. The combined fleets of 43 species, coordinated by human tactical doctrine and driven by shared determination, systematically destroyed an enemy that had seemed invincible. When the last Devourer entity was either destroyed or consumed by artificial gravity, the battlefield fell silent except for the communications chatter of survivors. The threat that had consumed 17 star systems and countless billions of lives was finally ended. Admiral Chen stood in the war room of the Times Determination Asterisk, looking at tactical displays that showed empty space where the enemy fleet had been. Around her, officers and crew members from dozens of species worked together to coordinate rescue operations and begin the long process of shutting down the gravitational manipulators safely. Ambassador Zalthara approached the Admiral, her crystalline form pulsing with patterns that humans had learned to recognize as profound gratitude mixed with deep sorrow. "It is over," the Zephyrian said simply. "The galaxy is safe, at a cost." Admiral Chen replied quietly. She was looking at a memorial display that showed the names and faces of 37 human pilots who hadn't survived the battle. 37 volunteers who had given their lives to ensure that billions of others would continue to live. A cost that humanity chose to pay, Zalthara observed. A debt that can never be repaid. Chen turned to face the ambassador. "There is no debt, Ambassador. There never was. I do not understand. Those pilots didn't die to repay some cosmic balance sheet," the Admiral explained. "They died because it was the right thing to do. Because someone had to stand between the darkness and the light, and they were willing to be that someone." She gestured toward the communications station, where messages of gratitude and celebration were pouring in from liberated worlds across the galaxy. "The debt you keep talking about, it doesn't exist. What exists is a galaxy where 43 species just proved they can work together when it matters most. A galaxy where former enemies became allies, where old prejudices were set aside for the greater good." Admiral Chen walked to the great viewport, looking out at the stars that would continue to shine because of what had happened here. "If anything," she said, "humanity owes the galaxy a debt of gratitude. You gave us a chance to prove that we're more than just former servants or useful animals. You gave us a chance to show who we really are." Ambassador Zalthara joined her at the viewport. In the distance, they could see ships from dozens of species working together to clear debris and establish safe passage through the former battle zone. Hegemony engineers worked alongside human technicians. Whisper scouts coordinated with Gorvani heavy cruisers. The sight would have been unimaginable just months before. "The Nexus vaults," Xalthara said suddenly. "The transfer has already begun. Every piece of accumulated knowledge, every secret technology, every advancement gathered over millions of years, it is all being copied to human databases." "And what will you do with that knowledge?" the ambassador asked. Admiral Chen smiled. And for the first time since the crisis began, it was a smile without shadows. "The same thing humanity has always done with knowledge, Ambassador. We'll use it to help others. We'll share it freely. We'll make sure it serves life instead of death." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "And we'll make sure that when the next impossible threat appears, because there's always a next threat, the galaxy will be ready. Not because one species is strong enough to stand alone, but because all species are strong enough to stand together." As if to underscore her point, a communication came through from the Fleet Communication Center. Commander Torres appeared on the display, her face showing exhaustion, but also satisfaction. "Admiral, we're receiving requests for assistance from 14 different systems. Reports of devourer remnants, damaged infrastructure, displaced populations. Also, formal applications from 7 species requesting to join the defense alliance we've established." Admiral Chen nodded. "Grant all requests for assistance. Begin coordinating relief efforts immediately. And tell those 7 species that membership in the alliance requires only one thing: a commitment to stand together when the next crisis comes." "Understood, Admiral." After the communication ended, Ambassador Jalthara was quiet for a long moment. "In our ancient texts," she said finally, "there are prophecies about a species that would emerge from slavery to become saviors. We always assumed they were metaphorical." "Maybe they were," Chen replied. "Maybe the real prophecy was that someday the galaxy would face a threat so terrible that all the old divisions and prejudices would become irrelevant. That survival itself would require every species to choose between fear and hope, between self-interest and sacrifice." She turned from the viewport to look directly at the ambassador. "The devourers didn't just threaten our lives, Ambassador. They threatened our future, our potential, our capacity to become something greater than what we are now. And humanity chose to defend that potential, even at the cost of your own people." "We chose to defend it because it includes our own people," Chen corrected gently. "Don't you see, Ambassador? We're not separate species anymore, struggling against each other for resources and dominance. We're one galaxy, one community, one future." The Admiral gestured toward the bustling activity around them, where humans and aliens worked side by side without conscious thought of the differences between them. "The debt wasn't ours to repay," she continued. "It was ours to forgive. And in forgiving it, in choosing to stand together instead of apart, we've all become something new, something better. After 11, 17 well. In well 4, people say do. Farm 1. We have Arthur. After Mon. We have Apartido. After Mon. Ambassador Zalthara's crystalline form began to pulse with patterns that humans had never seen before. Patterns that would later be recognized as the Zephyrian expression for hope fulfilled beyond all expectation. "Then the stars themselves stand in silent respect," she said, using an ancient phrase from her people's most sacred texts. "Not for victory over an enemy, but for the transformation of enemies into family." Admiral Chen nodded, understanding the depth of meaning in those words. Around them, The greatest fleet in galactic history began the long journey home, carrying not just news of victory, but proof that the universe was vast enough for all of them to thrive together. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the last echoes of an ancient evil faded into silence. And in that silence, 43 species heard something they had never expected. The sound of a galaxy learning to hope. The debt had been repaid in full. Not through suffering or servitude, but through the simple recognition that some things, like the right to exist, to dream, to reach for the stars, were never debts at all. They were gifts, freely given and freely shared, that became more valuable each time they were passed along. Humanity had finally come home to the galaxy, and the galaxy had finally learned what home could mean.